Welcome to Goal Journal's Football Match Review. What if the secret to winning the biggest match in European football was just, letting your opponent completely dominate you?
Right, which sounds insane.
It really does. I mean, normally when we think about a master plan in any high-stakes environment, we picture total control. Like you dictate the terms, you hold all the cards, you keep the ball, and you force your opponent to submit to your rhythm.
Exactly. That's the traditional mindset.
But today, we're looking at how Paris Saint-Germain just flipped that entire philosophy completely on its head. I mean, they surrendered the ball, invited sheer panic, and successfully orchestrated one of the greatest tactical masterclasses we've seen in Champions League history.
Yeah, it was brilliant.
They secured a back-to-back finals appearance by overcoming Bayern Munich in just an absolute thriller.
It really is. It's a completely counterintuitive way to look at the sport, especially at this elite level. We're so conditioned to believe that possession equals power. But what this match showed us is that deliberate submission can actually be a weapon. By willingly handing over the steering wheel, PSG basically forced a highly structured Bayern Munich side into a state of chaotic, offensive desperation.
So for you listening right now, if you want to understand how the upcoming Champions League final is going to be won or lost, you really need to understand the blueprint that was just laid down in this semifinal.
Oh, absolutely.
When you watch the final against Arsenal next week, don't just watch the ball. Watch the shifting defensive lines, watch the tactical traps. Today, we're going to decode those exact traps.
And there were a lot of them.
Tons. We're going to break down the specific mechanical shifts that neutralized a European giant, the individual player roles that made it all possible. And, of course, we have to unpack that massive rulebook-defining controversy that still has Bayern fans absolutely furious.
Yeah, we definitely can't skip that.
Let's get right into the overarching tactical battle, because this was truly a game of two entirely distinct halves, completely orchestrated by PSG's manager, Luis Enrique.
Right, and to really grasp what Luis Enrique did here, we have to talk about his evolution, or rather, the evolution he's forced upon PSG.
Yeah, they've changed a lot.
They really have. Historically, this club has been viewed as incredibly top-heavy. They were a team of expensive individual superstars expected to just conjure magic out of thin air while the rest of the team just kind of watched.
Right, the whole give it to the star and hope strategy.
Exactly. But Enrique has systematically stripped that away. He's implemented what's being referred to in analytical circles as a Pragmat 1.06 approach.
Okay, I've seen that term floating around in the analysis, and honestly, it sounds like a software update.
It kind of is.
My understanding is that Pragmat obviously stands for pragmatism, but the 1.06 is highly specific. It refers to his average expected goals allowed target.
Yes, exactly.
So it's this heavily statistically driven defensive mindset where you basically sacrifice the traditional beautiful game for raw numerical efficiency.
That is precisely the mechanism behind it. The 1.06 represents a strict threshold. It means he's designing a tactical structure where, mathematically, the opponent is only ever generating low probability scoring chances. It completely removes emotion from the defensive strategy.
Wow. So he just doesn't care if they have the ball?
Not at all. Enrique doesn't care if the opponent has 80% possession, as long as the statistical quality of their shots remains below that 1.06 threshold.
That's wild.
And that pragmatism was the defining feature of how this semifinal played out, especially when you contrast the first half with the second.
Yeah, let's trace that out, because the contrast was really jarring. In the first 45 minutes, PSG didn't look like a pragmatic defensive team at all.
No, they didn't.
They came out swinging, they were intensely aggressive, they were actively pushing their wingers and midfielders high up the pitch, sprinting into those deep spaces right behind Bayern's defensive line.
Yeah, they were hunting for an early knockout blow.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
Why the shift?
Well, the underlying logic of that aggressive start was pure psychological manipulation. Enrique knew he couldn't just sit back for 90 full minutes against Bayern Munich. I mean, they're too talented.
Right, eventually they'd find a crack.
Exactly. So he used the first half to aggressively unsettle them. By sending runners deep into Bayern's half, he forced Bayern's defenders to respect PSG's attacking threat.
Which stretches them out?
Yes, it stretched Bayern's entire formation, making them uncomfortable, making them second-guess their forward passes. But the true genius of this match, the moment the Pragmat 1.06 software really booted up, happened during the halftime interval.
It was like watching a totally different team walk out of the tunnel for the second half. They completely abandoned the high press.
Yep.
It actually reminded me of a classic rope-a-dope strategy in boxing.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Right, where you purposefully back yourself against the ropes, cover your face, and just let your massive, terrifying opponent swing wildly until their arms feel like lead.
That's exactly what they did.
PSG was perfectly happy to just absorb a staggering amount of pressure and wait for the counterattack. But tactically, how do you actually execute a football rope-a-dope without making a catastrophic mistake?
Well, it requires a massive structural shift.
Ooh.
And it really all comes down to vertical compactness.
Okay, break that down for us.
So during halftime, Enrique instructed his entire defensive line to lower their average starting position by about 15 yards.
Wow, that's a huge drop.
It is. Simultaneously, the wingers, who were pressing high in the first half, dropped back to essentially function as wingbacks.
Got it.
And what this does is eliminate the space behind the defense. Bayern loves to play through balls into space, but suddenly there was no space to run into.
Because PSG compacted the field.
Exactly. They built a dense, pressure-absorbing wall right on the edge of their own penalty area.
And because PSG completely choked out the center of the pitch, you could physically see Bayern Munich's frustration boil over. They transitioned from a highly structured attacking team into pure panic mode. And panic in high-stakes football is a fascinating thing to watch because it goes against everything these players train for.
It does. And when we talk about panic mode in this context, we're talking about a measurable physiological and statistical breakdown.
Really? Like in the data?
Oh, yeah. Data consistently shows that when teams face a deeply entrenched low block and the clock is ticking down, their pass completion in the final third drops significantly.
Huh.
Players succumb to tunnel vision. They stop scanning the field for intricate defense-unlocking passes. Instead, they just rush their decisions.
They just start blasting it.
Basically. They start taking low-percentage shots from 30 yards out, or they just aimlessly pump hopeful crosses into a penalty area that PSG had already fortified with 8 players.
So PSG didn't just defend Bayern physically?
No. They weaponized Bayern's own psychology against them, turning their desire to win into a chaotic desperation.
Which brings us to the actual personnel required to pull off this kind of psychological warfare. Because, you can draw up a low block on a whiteboard all day, but it only works if the players on the pitch are willing to take the physical punishment of a 45-minute siege.
Right. The tactical discipline has to be flawless.
Exactly. The individual brilliance we saw from PSG, contrasted with the glaring missing pieces for Bayern, really decided this match. We have to look closely at Fabian's role in the midfield.
Oh, Fabian is the perfect case study for this specific tactical setup. Too often, commentators just label a hard-working midfielder the engine room, which really doesn't explain anything about how they are influencing the game.
Yeah, it's kind of a cliche.
Exactly. But Fabian was doing something much more sophisticated.
He wasn't just running for the sake of running, right? He was acting like a tactical metronome.
Yes.
From what I saw, his positioning was hyper-calculated. He was constantly oscillating between the two center backs to plug whatever micro gaps Bayern tried to exploit.
Constantly shifting.
If Bayern shifted the ball left, Fabian shifted left to create a localized numerical advantage. He was essentially a moving wall.
That's a great way to put it.
He took on the grueling, unglamorous task of constantly fighting off 2 players at once to maintain that solid structure.
And that lateral movement is incredibly exhausting, but it's the bedrock of Enrique's pragmatic system.
Oh, sure.
And the reason Fabian's defensive sacrifice worked so well is because of what PSG had waiting in transition. We really have to bring Khvicha Kvaratskhelia into the conversation.
Yes.
Who fans have aptly nicknamed Kvaratskhelia for his incredible dribbling and flair. While Fabian was plugging the gaps and absorbing the punches, Kvaratskhelia was hovering just on the edge of the defensive block, acting as a coiled spring.
Right. His burst of speed and transition is just terrifying.
It really is.
And that combination, Fabian's metronomic defensive work rate paired with Kvaratskhelia's explosive counterattacking threat, meant that even when Bayern had all the possession, they could never truly commit all their men forward.
They had to respect the counter.
They were constantly looking over their shoulders. But let's flip the perspective to Bayern's attacking struggles, because there was a glaring issue in the final third. Harry Kane, as he's known, is one of the most lethal strikers in the world, yet he was utterly invisible during that second-half panic.
It is a fascinating problem to dissect. When you have a striker of Harry Kane's caliber, the instinct for fans and pundits alike is to just say, well, get the ball into the box and let him do the rest.
Right, feed the big man.
Exactly. But we need to examine the physical reality of the pitch when a team like PSG executes this specific defensive structure.
I want to try and map this out for the listener because it really is an issue of geometry.
It is.
Normally, a traditional striker thrives in the horizontal gaps between the center backs and the defensive midfielders. They just need 1 yard of separation to receive the ball, turn, and fire a shot.
Just a tiny pocket of space.
Right. But when PSG dropped their lines by 15 yards, those horizontal gaps literally vanished. You suddenly have 8 or 9 world-class athletes crammed into a 25-yard rectangle. It's so dense.
It becomes less about football and more about human geometry. It's just a numbers game where physical space is completely eradicated.
You've captured the absolute nightmare of playing against a disciplined low block. The spatial deprivation is extreme. PSG effectively sucked all the oxygen out of the penalty area.
Yeah.
A striker like Kane relies on precise service and intelligent positioning. But when the box is that crowded, you are fighting with 2 center backs just to jump, and there's a defensive midfielder standing exactly where you want to receive a cutback pass.
So it wasn't really his fault.
No, it wasn't necessarily a failure of Bayern's creativity. It was a physical impossibility. You cannot feed a striker if there is literally no physical space for the ball to travel into without striking a defender's leg or torso first.
Man, I can't imagine how frustrating that must be on the pitch. You have the ball, you're camped outside the opponent's house, but they've boarded up the windows and deadbolted the door.
It's infuriating. And it was exactly that boiling frustration, that inability to penetrate the box cleanly, that led to the defining, highly controversial moment of the match. Bayern Munich fans are absolutely irate right now. They feel a spot in the final was stolen from them because of the handball incident.
Oh, the handball. This is where the intersection of human instinct and a highly bureaucratic rulebook creates massive, massive friction.
Yeah, it's a mess.
To understand the outrage, we have to put emotions aside and look at the exact mechanics of the modern handball rule, which has just become a source of endless confusion.
Let me try to break down my reading of the rulebook here because it feels like there is a massive gray area.
There always is.
The specific rule applied in this incident deals with deflections. From my understanding, if a teammate heads or kicks the ball and it immediately ricochets into another defending player's arm, the default stance that it is not a penalty.
Right.
The logic being you can't punish a player for a point-blank ricochet. Is it really that straightforward, or am I missing the caveat?
Well, you have the foundation correct, but the caveat is everything. It is not a penalty unless the player deliberately plays the ball with their hand or, and this is the phrase that causes all the trouble, they artificially enlarge their body.
Ah, there it is. Because when you talk to the Bayern fans, they aren't arguing about the deflection itself. They're pointing to the replays and shouting about the destruction of movement.
Yes.
They argue that the PSG defender's arm was in a completely unnatural position, creating an artificial barrier that destroyed a clear attacking phase.
And we need to define destruction of movement biomechanically to understand their grievance.
Okay.
In football terminology, it means a player's silhouette was unnaturally wide for the specific action they were performing, and that extra width interrupted the flight of the ball.
So making themselves bigger on purpose.
Exactly. The argument from the Bayern camp is that the defender's arm didn't need to be extended away from his torso to maintain balance in that specific micro moment. Therefore, the arm artificially enlarged the body, blocked the cross, and destroyed the attacking movement.
But think about being the referee in that exact moment. You don't have the luxury of freezing time.
No, not at all.
You are trying to objectively judge an unnatural body position in a fraction of a second. A ball deflects off a player's head at 60 miles an hour from 2 yards away. The human body instinctively throws arms out to counterbalance a sudden pivot or jump.
It's just physics.
Right. How on earth is a referee supposed to differentiate between a natural biomechanical reflex to stay upright and a calculated cynical move to artificially widen a defensive wall?
They're essentially being asked to read the physiological intent of a player in a split second, which is an impossible task.
Yeah, good luck with that.
And that is exactly why this specific rule is a nightmare for consistency. The line between a reflex and a deliberate block is entirely subjective.
It really is.
If the referee decides the arm position was a natural consequence of the player's movement, no penalty. If they decide the arm was unjustifiably high, penalty. When a rule relies heavily on the subjective interpretation of intent rather than a black and white physical parameter, you are guaranteeing that one side will feel completely cheated.
It just highlights the messy human element in a sport where we desperately crave objective fairness.
Absolutely.
But, controversy and rulebook debates aside, the final whistle blew. The history books will record that PSG's pragmatism held firm. They absorbed the panic, survived the spatial siege, walked away from the penalty shouts, and punched their ticket to the ultimate stage.
They did what they had to do.
Which means we have to pivot and look ahead to what is shaping up to be a monumental Champions League final. Mikel Arteta's Arsenal against Luis Enrique's Paris Saint-Germain.
Oh, the historical stakes for PSG alone make this fascinating. Securing back-to-back final appearances solidifies their transformation.
It really shuts up the doubters.
It does. It silences the critics who claim they were just a collection of fragile superstars. They have proven they are a hardened, cynical collective, capable of navigating the deepest waters of European football. But the true intrigue lies in the tactical collision we are about to witness.
It is the ultimate clash of ideology.
Oh, completely.
Under Mikel Arteta, Arsenal has evolved into this incredibly structured, possession-obsessed machine. They rely on methodical, heavily rehearsed patterns of play to pull defenses apart. They want to hold the ball and dictate the tempo.
Right.
But based on what we just analyzed, my theory is that Arsenal's preference for slow, structured possession might be exactly what Luis Enrique wants.
You might be right.
Like, if Arsenal insists on dominating the ball, couldn't PSG just deploy the exact same 15-yard drop? Just build that Fabian-led moving wall, let Arsenal pass it around the perimeter of the box endlessly, and then unleash Kvaratskhelia on the counter.
That scenario is precisely what Mikel Arteta will be obsessing over this entire week.
It has to be keeping him up at night.
If Arsenal falls into the trap of sterile possession, meaning they hold the ball outside the penalty area without actually penetrating the defensive lines, they will be playing right into Enrique's pragmat 1.06 parameters.
So what does Arteta do?
Well, Arteta's challenge is figuring out how to bypass that intense midfield work rate. Arsenal will have to find a way to inject sudden dynamism into their possession.
They can't just be slow and methodical.
No, they need to move the ball from flank to flank with extreme velocity to force PSG's defensive block to shift horizontally. Only by forcing them to shift faster than they can recover will those micro gaps temporarily open up.
And crucially, Arsenal has to maintain their emotional control.
Oh, massive point.
If the quick passing doesn't work early on, if they find themselves locked out of the box just like Bayern did, they cannot afford to slip into that physiological panic mode.
No, they can't.
The moment they start rushing decisions and firing low-percentage shots, they are dead in the water.
The psychological discipline required to stick to a complex passing structure when the clock is ticking and the opponent refuses to break is immense.
It's so hard to do.
Arsenal has to accept that they might have the ball for 70% of the match and still feel like they are losing the tactical battle. It will be a true test of whether Arteta's structured predictability can solve the puzzle of Enrique's chaotic pragmatism.
It's going to be an absolute chess match played at 100 miles an hour.
I can't wait.
Which leaves us with a lingering thought for you to ponder before the kickoff. If Luis Enrique was willing to completely abandon his team's traditional identity, surrender possession, and rely on pure, gritty submission to survive a giant like Bayern Munich, what entirely unexpected tactical trap is he designing in secret for Arsenal?
That is the million-dollar question.
Will the final be decided by a brilliant, unpredictable masterclass? Or will we find ourselves right back here debating the biomechanics of a defender's arm as the trophy is lifted? Thank you. See you soon with upcoming matches.